Chapter 32 of Gone to Earth. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Gone to Earth by Mary Webb, Chapter 32. Morning by morning Hazel watched the fuchsia bushes set with small red flowers, purple cupped with crimson stamens, sway in beautiful abandon. The great black bees pulled at them like a calf at its mother. Their weight dragged the slender drooping branches almost to the earth. So the rich pageantry of beauty, the honeyed silent lives went on, and would go on, it seemed, forever. And then one morning all was over. One of Undern's hard early frosts took them all, the waxen red-pointed buds, the waxen purple cups, the red-veined leaves. The bees were away, and Hazel, seeking them, found a few half alive in sheltered crevices, and many frozen stiff. She put those that were still alive in a little box near the parlour fire. Soon a low delighted humming began, as they one by one recovered and set off to explore the ceiling. Into this contented buzzing came Reddin, who had just been again to Sally's, and was much put out by her refusal to go away before November. "What the hell is all this humming?" he asked. "It's bees. I fetched 'em in to see good times a bit afore they die." "What a child's trick!" he said, fending off an inquiring bee. "Why, they'll stay here all winter. We shall get stung." Then he saw the hospital full of bees by the fire. "More?" he said. "Good Lord!" He threw the box into the fire. Hazel was silent with horror. At last she gasped, "I was mothering 'em." "You're very keen on mothering. Wouldn't you like a kid to mother?" "No, I'd liefer mother the bees and foxes as none takes thought on. I dunna like babies much, all bold and wrinkly. Martha said as having 'em made folk pray to die, but as it was worth anything to get one. But I dunna think so. I think them ugly. I seed one in a pram outside that cottage in the hollow." Reddin jumped. "And it was uglier than a pig. I think you're a cruel beast, Jack Reddin, to burn my bees, and they so comfortable, knowing I was taking care on 'em." She would not speak to him for the rest of the day. He was so bored in the evening that he went out and demanded a box full of bees from Vessons. "The missus wants 'em," he said sheepishly. Vessons was prepared to be pleasant in small matters. He fetched some from the hive. "Here you are," he said patronizingly, "but you munna be always coming to me after 'em." He was oblivious of the fact that they were Reddin's bees. Reddin presented them. "There," he said gruffly, "now you can be civil again." "But these be hive bees," said Hazel, "and they was comfortable to begin with. I didn't want that sort. I wanted miserable uns." "Hang it, how could I know?" asked Reddin irritably. "No, I suppose you couldna," said Hazel. "You'm terrible stupid, Jack Reddin." So life went on at Undern, and Hazel adapted herself to it as well as she could. It was strange that the longer she lived there, the more she thought of Edward. She always saw his face lined with grief and very pale, not tanned and ruddy with fresh air as she had known it. It was as if his mentality reached across the valley to hers and laid its melancholy upon her. Sometimes she was very homesick for Foxy, but she would not have her at Undern. She did not trust the place. She never went out anywhere, for people stared, and when Reddin with some difficulty persuaded her to amble through the fields with him on a pony he picked up cheap for her, she always wanted to keep in his own fields. It was not until nearly the end of October that Vessons got his chance. Reddin had to go to a very important fair. He wanted Hazel to go with him, but she said she was tired, and guessing the reason, he immediately gave in. In spite of Vessons' earnest desire to get him off, he started late. He galloped most of the way, determined to get in early. He liked coming home to tea and seeing Hazel awaiting him in the firelight. As soon as he had gone, Vessons set out for Sally's, anxious that she should be quick, But Sally would not hurry. It was washing day, and she also insisted on making all the children very smart, unaware that their extreme ugliness was her strength. It was not till 3 o'clock that she arrived at the front door, baby in arms, the 4 children heavily expectant at her heels, and Vessons stage managing in the background. Hazel had been looking at 2 of the only books at Undern, The Horse and The Dog, illustrated. Vessons had views about books. He considered them useful in their place. "There's nought like a book," he would say, "one of these here big fat novels, or a book of sermons, to get a nice red gleddy fire. A book at the front and a bit of slack behind, and there you are." There the books were too. So Hazel looked at the Book of the Horse until she knew all the pictures by heart. She had fallen asleep over it, and she jumped up in panic when Sally spoke. "Who be you?" she asked in a frightened voice as they eyed her. "I'm Sally Haggard, and these be my children." She surveyed them proudly. "Do you notice that they favour anyone?" Hazel looked at them timidly. "They favour you?" she said. "Not Mr. Reddin." "Mr. Reddin?" "Ah, they ought to. They'm his'n." "His'n?" "Yes, parrot." "Be you the 'ooman as Martha said Jack lived along of?" "He did live along of me." "Why then, you'd ought to be Mrs. Reddin and wear his gownd and live at Undern," said Hazel. "Eh?" Sally was astonished. "And he said there wasn't any other but me." Sally laughed. "You believe that lie, you little softy?" Hazel looked at the children. "Be they all his'n?" she said. "Every man jack of 'em, and not so much as a thank you for me." The children were ranged near their mother on high chairs. They gaped at Hazel, sullen and critical. An irrepressible question broke from Hazel. "What for did you have 'em?" Sally stared. "What for?" she repeated. "Surely to goodness, girl, you're not as innocent as all that." "I ain't ever going to have any," Hazel went on with great firmness as she eyed the children. "God above," muttered Sally, "he's fooled her worse'n me." "Come and look at the baby, my dear," she said in a voice astonishingly soft. She looked at Hazel keenly. "Dunna you know?" she asked. "What?" "As you're going to have a baby." Hazel sprang up, all denial, but Sally, having told the children to play, spoke for a long time in a low tone, and finally convinced a white, sick, trembling Hazel of the fact. Not being sensitive herself, she did not realize the ghastly terror caused by her lurid details of the coming event. Hazel looked so ill that Sally tried to administer consolation. "Maybe it'll be a boy, and you'll be fine and pleased to see un grown a fine tall man like Reddin." Hazel burst into tears, so that the children stopped their play to watch and laugh. "But I dunna want it to grow up like Jack," she said. "I want it to grow up like Ed'ard, and none else." "Well, you are a queer girl. If you like him as you call Ed'ard, what for did you take up with Jack?" "I dunno." "Well, the best you can do," said Sally, "is to go back to your Edward, Litherman's load and all, and if he wunna take you—" "Eh, but he will." A wonderful tender smile broke on Hazel's face. "He'll come to the front door and pull me in and say, 'Come in, little Hazel, and get a cup of tea,' and it'll be all the same as it was used to be." "Well, he must be a fool, but so much the better for you. If I was you, I'd go right back to neat. Now, what you say to a cup of tea? I'm thinking it's high time I took a bite and sup in this parlour." They got tea, and Vessons, hovering in the yard, was in despair. He could not appear, for Hazel must not know his part in the affair.
"Lors, if they've begun on tea, it's all up with Andrew," he remarked to the Swan in passing.
Dusk came on, and still no Sally appeared. The two chimneys smoked hospitably, and he wanted his tea. He was a very miserable old man. He repaired to the farthest corner of the domain and began to cut a hedge, watching the field track. Soon Reddin appeared, and Vessons was unable to repress a chuckle. "Rather him than me," he said. Reddin, having fruitlessly shouted for Vessons, took the cob round to the yard himself. Then he went in. As he entered the parlour, aware of a comfortable scent of tea and toast, he met the solemn gaze of 7 pairs of eyes, and for a moment he was, for all his tough skin, really staggered. Then he advanced upon Sally with his stock firmly grasped in his hand. "Get out of this," he said. The baby set up a yell. Sally rose and stood with her arm raised to fend off the blow. "Jack," said Hazel, "she'm got the best right to be at Undern. Leave her stay. She'm a right nice 'ooman." Reddin gasped. Why would Hazel always do and say exactly the opposite to what he expected? "But you're the last person," he began. "You're thinking she'd ought to be jealous of me, Jack Reddin," said Sally, "but we'm neither of us jealous. I tell you straight, she's too good for you. You've lied to me, I'm used to it. Now you'm lied to her, the poor innocent little thing." "What for did you tell me lies, Jack?" asked Hazel. What with the unfaltering gaze of the two women and the unceasing howls of the baby, Reddin was completely routed. "Oh, damn you all," he said, and went hot-foot in a towering passion to look for Vessons. A man to rage at would be a very great luxury. Having at last found Vessons harmlessly hedge-brushing, he was rather at a loss. "How dare you let Sally in?" he began. "Sally?" "Yes. Why the hell did you come away here and leave the house?" "The hedge wanted doing." His tone was so innocent that Reddin was suspicious. "You didn't bring her yourself, did you?" "Now, is it me," says Vessons, reasonable but hurt, "as generally brings these packs of unruly women to Undern?" "I believe you're lying, Vessons." Vessons opened his mouth to say, "Notice is give," but seeing that in his master's present mood it might be accepted, he closed it again. When Reddin went in, Sally was gone, and Hazel, much as usual, ministered to his comfort. The only signs of the recent tumult were the constrained silence and the array of cups and plates. "You'd better understand once and for all," he said at last, "that I'll never have that woman here." "Not if I went?" "Never. I'd kill her first." "What for did you tell me lies?" "Because you were so pretty and I wanted you." The flattery fell on deaf ears. "Them chillun's terrible ugly," said Hazel wearily. Reddin came over to her. "But yours'll be pretty," he said. "Dunna come nigh me," cried Hazel fiercely. "She says I'm going to have a little un. It was a sneak's trick, that, and you're a cruel beast, Jack Reddin, to burn my bees and kill the rabbits and make me have a little un unbeknown." "But it's what all women expect." "You'd ought to have told me. She says it's mortal pain to have a baby, and I'm feared. "Hazel," he said humbly, "I may as well tell you now that I mean to marry you. The parson must divorce you, then we'll be married, and I'll turn over a new leaf." "I'll ne'er marry you," said Hazel, "not till doom breaks. I dunna like you. I like Ed'ard, and if I mun have a baby, I'd lief it was like Ed'ard and not like you." With that she went out of the room, and he noticed that she was wearing the dress she had come in and not the silk. He sat by the fire brooding, but at last managed to cheer himself by the thought that she would get over it in time.
She was naturally upset by Sally just now. And of course the parson'll never take her back, nor her father, he reflected. Yes, it'll all come right. He was upheld in this by the fact that Hazel's manner next day was much as usual, only rather quiet. End of chapter 32. Recording by Rachel Linton, Bristol, UK.